for this session. Our session today is sponsored by Transport Workers Union of America. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. We encourage everyone to keep their cameras on so we can see your bright smiling faces. I can't talk this afternoon. But with your cameras on, we'd like you to keep your mics off until we have a time and opportunity to have a discussion or called on by the speaker. The chat is definitely open for your comments and questions, and I'll be monitoring that while Mr. Roy is doing the presentation so we can help get some questions answered if you have any. At the end of the session, we'll be posting a link to our evaluation/feedback form. If you just take a second and turn those in, we notice that some of you have been doing it, so we appreciate that. And then if you have any technical issues, go ahead and post those in the chat. We'll do our best to see if we can't help you resolve those. Some of it may be on your end, but we'll check. If you have, it's always easy to go out and come back in if you want to try and reconnect. So our speaker today is Roy Flores, and Roy is a leading edge speaker, trainer, and consultant in safety and leadership development. He has spoken at conferences, conventions, corporate retreats throughout the U.S. and internationally. A few of his clients include Chevron, Intel, DuPont, Shell, Kellogg Brown and Root, Bechtel, the Department of Energy, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He has a degree in psychology from the University of Houston and a master's in neuro-linguistic programming. He is a former captain and jet pilot in the U.S. Marine Corps. After the Corps, he was a top stockbroker with Merrill Lynch and Lehman Brothers. He was born and raised in Houston, where he currently resides. He's married and has 4 children. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Flores.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. And thank you, everyone, for having me speak here at the Texas Labor Management Conference. And thank you for the introduction. I'm going to be sharing with you some probably new skills, some things most of you probably have never been exposed to in the past. And so there's some skills and strategies for improving safety performance, but coming from a completely different viewpoint. So I want to share some of those things with you, and we'll be going through a PowerPoint slide as well. So to get started, I'd like for you, and we can see many of you, I'd like for you to, I'm going to try to interact with you as much as I can in this presentation. So I'd like for you to do me a favor. I'd like everyone to just raise your right hand as high as you can. Just raise your right hand as high as you can. And now, after you've done that, I'd like for you to go a little bit higher. All right. And so when I do these in person, when I ask the crowd to raise their right hand as high as they can, they go to a certain level. And then I ask them to go higher, and almost everyone stretches and goes higher. So I asked them, why didn't you go as high as you possibly could the first time around when I asked you to? And it's usually because we have comfort zones of performance. And today we're going to have to start thinking about how do we overcome those what I could do. And number 2, I found out that when we work together as a team, we can do much better. So we can always do more. And that's what's going to be required for us to achieve extraordinary performance, is for each and every one of us to do more and to work together as a team to accomplish that. So here's what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to write down, and you can do it on the chat with Cindy to let her know. I'd like for you to consider I want you to think about what's the first thing you think about when you hear the word safety. All right, next slide. So when you hear the word safety, what is it that you think about? What do you think about when you hear the word safety? And I'd like Cindy to tell me a few of the responses that we're getting from the crowd.
So the first one is avoiding accidents.
Right. What are some others?
Working without injuries or deaths.
Okay.
PPE.
Right. I'll get a couple of more. If I can get a couple of more, and these are good. These are all good. When I ask this question to large crowds, I normally have a flip chart on the wall or up on the stage, and I draw a circle, and I ask people to give me their responses, and I start writing their responses, and I inside the circle and some outside the circle. Let me tell you which are the ones that I draw inside the circle. So next slide. What I typically are the common responses that I put inside the circle would be planning, meetings, policies, procedures, training. And here we talk about how do we avoid accidents? How do we avoid injuries or working without injuries? PPE, in other words, how do we start planning on the PPE that we're going to need when we're working? And so when I call 90% of the things that people respond when I'm doing these trainings, 90% of them usually fit inside the circle. And inside the circle, I call it the doing. So next slide. The doing part is what we do in the area of safety. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have training. We're going to have to pre-task planning meetings. We're going to look at our policies and procedures. We're going to do all the things that we normally do in our day-to-day work environment. But I'm going to ask you to consider a new possibility, something that most of you probably don't do a lot of work on. But I have found in my more than 30 years of doing this, that when you focus on the second part of safety, or what I call the second part of safety, that's really where your biggest bang for the buck comes from. That's where I've been able to get extraordinary performance, to accomplish things that have never been done before in organizations. And here's what we want to do. It's not just the doing in safety, but what I call the being of safety. And so next slide. Is the being of safety is who I'm going to be. In other words, the person that I'm going to be. And this is my attitude, my mental state, all of those things, the person that I am while I'm working on safety. So this is more the mental aspects, the psychological aspects of safety. And that's what I call the being part of safety. And again, through my experience has been when we work on that, we typically get extraordinary performance. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that I've been involved in, some of the companies I've been involved in, and the kinds of results that we've been able to achieve when we work not just on the doing, but work on the being as well. Okay. So next is what we want to think about. And again, I want you to consider a different possibility, and that is that how we think about safety and what we believe about safety are critical to our performance. So it's our thinking, our believing, and again, it's not just the doing, it's the being, and this is part of your self-image and your self-esteem. That's what I call it. When I call self-esteem psychology, by the way, I'm also including self-image. So it's how you see yourself, how you think about yourself, and how you feel about yourself, and not just yourself, but your work, your coworkers, everything that you do. So next, here's what I want you to think about. This is the being part is what I include in here. These are the things that we include, and go ahead and put those up. Will be the attitudes, the mindsets or mental states, the beliefs, and of course, the emotional states, how people feel affects their performance. Now, here's what I want you to understand. A lot of times what we don't take into consideration, a lot of our workers show up to work every day, and some of them have problems going on. Maybe it's a problem with a husband or wife, relationship problems, money problems. Maybe a child is sick. Maybe they got drunk last night. We don't know, but they have some issues that they come to work. And many people say, well, you need to leave your personal life at the gate or at the front door. But as you are probably aware and intuitively, you know that leaving your problems at home is not what actually happens. You bring them to work. So we have to have a plan, a strategy for dealing with those types of issues every day on how do we improve the attitudes, mental states, beliefs, the emotional states that people come in with to work. So you have to have a plan, and that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. How do we do that? How do we go in and change those attitudes and mindsets when people come into work every day? So that's the being part of safety, other than just the doing part of safety. Okay, next. Excuse me. Three, I want to just share with you, I was an enlisted Marine for a couple of years, and then I became an officer. And as a Marine Corps officer, we were taught three. Two is take care of your people. And number three is build and develop other leaders. And so obviously in combat, that's important because leaders tend to get killed in combat. And so we have to have someone that killed or injured or wounded. So somebody has to step up immediately in that kind of environment. But I want to focus on number two, take care of your people. And what does that mean? And so if show the next one, Cindy. In taking care of your people, it's not just giving them the tools, the equipment, the food, the water, the ammunition, all the things that they need to accomplish the mission. You have to focus on that and make sure that they have all of that. Number two is not to put your troops in harm's way unnecessarily. I can give you example of after example of where people have failed in that number two by putting troops in harm's way unnecessarily. And number three, here's the one I want to focus on today, is work on morale. So what is morale? Troop morale, we understand to be, what is the enthusiasm, the motivation, and again, the mental states and the emotional states of our troops, because that motivation, the desire level, to go out and conquer, to go out and win, is paramount to success. That burning desire to succeed is what we instill in people. And that's what we want to work on, because what I've found is, again, when people are working on morale, when they feel good about themselves and each other in their work, they go out and accomplish great things, extraordinary things. All right. So the next one. I want to share with you a pyramid that I discovered, that I came up with years ago. I've worked with very high performing organizations, and not just as a consultant, but actually involved in those organizations. And what I discovered is that all of these organizations, whether it was Lehman Brothers or the Marine Corps or all these other organizations that have just achieved extraordinary success, followed this pyramid, and most of them don't know. As a matter of fact, I don't know of any of them that do know that they're actually following the order and sequence of this pyramid, but I've discovered that subconsciously it's being done. So the first part of the pyramid is actually called culture. So we have to develop a culture that will support high performance. So what does the culture mean? Well, I'm going to give you an example from the U.S. Marine Corps, is the first one that I'll give you. So you're indoctrinated in our culture in the Marine Corps when you go into boot camp or officer candidate school, either one. Officer candidate school is boot camp for officers. So I've done both. And so here's what you're indoctrinated in: the history, the 245 years of Marine Corps history. You're indoctrinated in our traditions, our values, all our history. You're indoctrinated in what's important to us. What do we value? What are things that we approve of? What do we not approve of? Those are all ingrained in you as you go into the Marine Corps. Now, we've established these types of cultural indoctrinations, and it can be a half a day, a full day, 2 days. It doesn't have to take 3 months like we do in the Marine Corps, but you establish an indoctrination for your culture. And again, to let people know what's important to you, what's valuable to you, and what do we approve of? What do we disapprove of? How do we win in our organization. And that's what we want to work on and let people know right up front when they join our project or our company. They have to know, we have to set those expectations of what's going to be expected of them and the organization as well. And that's when you do it through your indoctrination program. The second level of that pyramid is now the behaviors. What are the behaviors that you're going to have to exhibit and have to do while you're being trained to become a Marine or to become a stockbroker with Lehman Brothers? What are the behaviors that you have to exhibit in order to accomplish extraordinary performance? So we start with step by step. Here's the things you're going to do. Here, and again, here's the things that are expected of you. So we put all of that together, and then we start training people. And this is the skill development, which is the next level on the pyramid. Every organization accomplishes great things. They start working on people's skills. They start working on how do we train people to start accomplishing great things. And give you an example, in the Marine Corps, I was 19 years old when I joined the Marine Corps out of high school. And I joined the Marine Corps. I'd never fired a firearm in my life. And I go to Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego, and then we go to a rifle range at Camp Pendleton. And they step by step, the skills that they develop are very, very slow and methodical, but they want to make sure that you get these skills and that you learn them very, very well. Your first day out on the range is nothing but more than sight alignment. In other words, how do you correctly put the target in your sights so that you have a good chance of hitting that target? And then you're starting to do what's called snap in, where you got your sling on your rifle and it's tucked on you real tight. You learn to tuck it so that the recoil, in those years we were using an M14 rifle, which is a very high-powered rifle. In Vietnam, it was used as a sniper rifle. And you learn to snap in, do sight alignment, and the next thing you do is trigger squeeze and breathe. So you're breathing and you learn to pull the trigger properly. And you spend days, several days, 2 to 3 days of working on nothing but sight alignment, trigger squeeze, and breathing. And you're dry firing one round. In other words, you're clicking the trigger, no round in the chamber, you're just clicking the trigger. And you're doing it in several positions, kneeling, standing, sitting, all of the different positions. Then you finally get to put one round in there and you actually go to the range and start shooting at targets. And so you learn to shoot one round at a time, and then at 100 yards, 200 yards, till you finally go back up to 500 yards. And so what ends up happening is you start hitting that target pretty consistently. And for a guy who's never fired a firearm before, I started doing very well. And so now my beliefs, which is the next rung on this pyramid, the beliefs about what I'm capable of doing start to increase, because now I'm starting to get really proficient with a firearm. And lo and behold, after 2 weeks of training on the range, I become a sharpshooter in the Marine Corps. So how do they take a 19-year-old kid that's never fired a firearm and turn him into a sharpshooter in 2 weeks? And that's what happens, because these organizations know how to build and develop people, and that's what we want to do. And again, a big part of this is morale, attitudes, enthusiasm, desire is always being worked in on all the skills that we have to learn. And so the last rung on this pyramid is what I call self-image and self-esteem. How you see yourself, how you think about yourself, and how you feel about yourself are critical to your success, not just at work, but in life in general. So think about it. When you put that Marine Corps uniform on, that especially your dress blues, and you graduate from boot camp, you're no longer the kid on the block. You're no longer the kid from the barrio. You're somebody that's special. You're a U.S. Marine now, and you feel special. You feel important, and you feel valuable. And so it's a complete shift in who you are. Your being has shifted. You're now someone else, and someone who can do more, who can accomplish more, and who's capable and knows is capable of doing much, much more. So the self-image and self-esteem is what you should be working on. So my question to you is this: in your work environment right now, do your workers feel special? Do they feel important? Do they feel valuable? If they are not, then that's one of the things you have to work on, because that's how you start improving morale. So these are skills that normally we're not taught. We're taught about, hey, you got to have your hearing protection on. Hey, you got to follow policies and procedures. You've got to do all these things in doing, but we rarely work on the morale, the being part, the self-image, the self-esteem part. So I want you to consider that this might be a possibility, because I can prove to you over and over again, we've made this work in organizations that decide we're willing to consider this new possibility that this might work. The results have been proven over and over again. So that's what I want you to consider, that new possibility that we can make this happen. So when people see themselves differently, they think about themselves differently, and they feel differently, and they feel special and important, they will perform. All right, next slide. I'm sorry. So here's what I want you to consider. Here's the possibility. How people feel affects how they perform. And the better people feel, the better they will perform. And I know that that goes contrary to a lot of people, people's thinking and safety. You know, a lot of people tell, oh, we're going to get into touchy-feely concepts. No, it's not touchy-feely. Again, it's working on morale. It's working on attitudes, motivation, enthusiasm, desire. We're going to continue to do all the other things we have to do, but when you do these, it makes the others go very, very well, very well. So it's just doing another part of safety that we don't tend to focus on, and that we don't tend to work on and build on to get people to start performing. I'll give you a classic example of this. I went to a large oil and gas company, international. All of you know who it is if I gave you the name. And I was speaking. They had called me and asked me. They said, "Hey, we heard you've done some work with Chevron and Shell and some of these other organizations, Intel and all these companies and organizations." They said, "So we wanted to talk to you about your program." And I was sitting with the senior executive VP of the company, and I was explaining to him that how people feel affects how they perform, and that we should consider working on that part. And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, "Roy," he said, "I don't care how our people feel. I just care about them getting the job done." And that's all he's interested in. And I can't tell you how many organizations feel the same way. How people feel is not important to them. All they want is people to do the job. Well, what if people could do the job much more effectively, much more safely? And what I'm talking about here is not just about safety, because when you work on the self-image and self-esteem of your workforce, everything improves. Cost, schedule, productivity, quality, everything, every business parameter that you're looking for will improve if you'll consider doing this, if you'll consider working on this new possibility. I've seen it happen time and time again where we'll go in. And by the way, excuse me, I'm working on a summer cold here. The first thing I ask senior managers, either in a company or a project, is what would be something extraordinary on this project or in this company that's never been done before? What would be something we've never done before? And I'll give you some examples in a minute when I talk about some of the case studies. But that's where our starting point is, to set a big goal, a big objective, to do something we've never done before. And that's what I want everybody in your company and project to start considering, and to create such a positive work environment that people actually love coming to work. Boy, what a change is that, where people actually want to come to work. They enjoy coming to work. What a shift in a mental state and emotional states that people have. But here's what happens when people are emotionally wired for performance, when they're motivated. And by the way, they're doing this willingly, not because you tell them to, but because they want to do it. Now they give you the performance and they find ways to improve. They find ways to make it better on your projects and companies. It's not up to management to do it. It's the people doing the work that come up with the ideas and the ways for us to improve performance. And that's what you want. You want everybody in your organization contributing. As my son said, what he learned in the Marine Corps was when you work together as a team, you accomplish much more. But you've got to get people willing to want to do that and to do it through their own free volition, that they want to do it because it's important to them and they feel important. Okay. So you have to develop these strategies, and there's a step-by-step strategies that we implement in organizations to start making this happen. The critical factor in all of this is, are you willing to consider that this might be possible? That's the most critical factor, because most organizations like this gentleman, and by the way, this company, you've seen their performance on television and cable news. Their performance has not been very good. You've seen them. They come out in national news, by the way, many times. They've come out before. They're not interested in how people feel. They just want the job done. And I'm telling you, there's a better way. Okay. Next slide. So it's all about skill development. It's about skills developing and training and coming up with a step-by-step plan. You know, these are things we have to practice. You have to, first of all, become aware that these things exist and that we have to work on them. And then once your awareness is up, we start working on how do we develop the skills. Part of it is, I'm going to tell you right now, part of it is what we call, the communication skills, the quality of life skills. All of these things are going to be step by step implemented, but it takes practice and it takes training. How to talk to people, how to train, how to teach and treat people. We have to work on those, and we have to actually practice them before we implement them out in the field. I'll give you a classic example of this. When I became a Marine officer, I got accepted for flight school, and I ended up going to Pensacola, Florida for aviation indoctrination. I flew T-28s. It's a propeller-driven airplane, 9-cylinder radial engine. It's like a World War II fighter airplane. And you fly that for about 50 hours, and then they select who goes jets, helicopters, or propellers. And I did very well in my class, so I got selected for jet pilot training. By the way, all Marine Corps, Navy, and Coast Guard pilots, everybody goes through Navy flight school. And so I got sent to jet pilot training in a little town called Beeville, Texas. And after a few months of flying jets, you finally get an opportunity to go fly on an aircraft carrier. And by the way, do you know the very first time they send you out on an aircraft carrier to fly on that ship, for the very first time, they send you by yourself? And do you know why they send you by yourself? Because there's no one dumb enough to go with you. Okay. We're shown films. Every carrier takeoff and landing is videotaped. So before you go out to the ship for about a week, they show you videotapes of people who did not do it correctly. And the end result was, somebody coming too far back on the power, too low. They crash into the back end of the ship, instant fatality. Or too far over to the left, and they go into the drink, they go into the water. If you go into the water with an airplane, it sinks too fast, so you're going to be a fatality. So they're showing us all these videotapes of carrier catastrophes, right? And so you're looking at these things. So when you go out there for the first time by yourself, you're thinking, man, if I screw this up, I don't lose my job. I don't lose, equipment. I lose my life if I screw this up. So it gets your attention. So how do they train you and develop you to go out and fly on this carrier when you've never even seen one before? And so you practice flying on a runway, and it's got the outline there of a ship. You practice flying what's called the ball, and hitting a certain spot over and over again. And that's what you learn to do. And you're doing it with touch and goes all the time. But the other part of the training they spend even more time is called simulator training. And these were simulators back in the 70s. They took a 5-story building full of computers to run the simulator, but the simulator was like on a giant spider. And you'd pull the stick to the right, it would bank over to the right. If you pulled power on it, it would kind of push forward and you could hear the engine winding up. Yeah, I mean, this was state of the art stuff. And you practice flying over and over and over on a simulator and getting used to the sounds, the sights, the movements. Of course, this simulator, the ship's not sitting 60 feet above the water line or going at 25 knots into the wind, right? But it gives you that muscle response, eye and hand coordination, and gives you the confidence level to go out and do it. And so we practice. Same thing we've got to do in this skill development. We got to become aware, to start training, and then start practicing. So we need some kind of simulator training for you and your frontline supervisors to actually go talk to their people and treat their people in a completely different way than what they've done before. Not that what you've done is wrong. There's just more than what we can do. And that's what I want you to consider again. What is more that we can do? And I want you to start considering a new way of doing things that might give us the improvement. All right. Next slide. So the first one I'd like to talk to you about is right there on right side of outside of Houston, there in Pasadena and Deer Park, Texas, the Shell Maya 2 project. This was a project that was going to have 1,000 people working, year and a half schedule, over 1 million hours in man hours. So, this was a big project, not huge, but 1,000 people working on a project is a pretty good project. So I asked the senior managers from both Shell. This was being constructed by Kellogg Brown and Root. So I got the Shell people, the Brown and Root people, and I said, what's something we've never done before on this type of project? And the first thing they said was, well, we've never built one of these with this many people injury free. In other words, we've never built one where somebody didn't have an injury. So I said, all right, so the first thing we want to start focusing in on, let's build this thing and nobody gets hurt. That's the first thing we have to start indoctrinating everyone that walks on this project, that we're going to build it and nobody gets hurt. Okay. So we started an indoctrination program, people coming in. We started working on quality of life issues. By the way, quality of life issues, and you may not be able to do many of them, but we'll come up with some that will affect people. And sometimes it can just be the restrooms. I mean, are your porta cans, are they well kept? Or, some simple things like that are quality of life issues. And we work on those. And so we indoctrinated people coming in, that we started letting them know that, hey, we're going to build this project without anybody getting hurt. The other 4 things that I asked them to do was that we're going to come in ahead of schedule, under budget. We're going to do high quality work, and we're going to have fun building this project. And so we set that up as our standard for what we were going to do, our mission for accomplishing something great on the Shell Maya 2 project. So we did a variety of things, 17 things we did from quality of life. We taught the supervisors, frontline supervisors, the general foreman, all the way from project manager all the way down to that frontline supervisor. Here's how you want to treat people. Here's how you want to talk to them. And by the way, when I say talk to them, I'm talking explicitly and very specifically. Here's what you're going to say. Here's how you're going to say it. And here's the questions you're going to ask that we know impact people, not only from a mental and emotional state, but from a behavioral state. We're talking about communication skills that work behaviorally as well. So we taught supervisors to do that. Everybody started practicing it. And once they practiced it, we would work with them to go out in the field and actually start utilizing this and practicing with people out in the field, so that we implemented it. and so that we could get the results. I'll give you the results on this project. Shell Maya 2 project came in 3 months ahead of schedule. We came in 22% under budget. And the worst accident we had, which by the way was the last week of the project, a guy smashed his thumb. That was our worst accident, a smashed thumb. And it was the last week. You should have seen how many people were disappointed because we had a smashed finger on the last week of the project. But that was, if that's the worst that happens, we're doing pretty good. But your financials, all of the things you're looking for, all the business aspects that you're trying to get, you're going to get it if you'll focus on people, and again, self-image and self-esteem. Next slide, or next. Intel Fab 22 was Chandler, Arizona, right outside of Phoenix. I was called in. They asked me to interview, and they said, we're going to interview you on a Thursday. You have 2 hours. And they said, by the way, we're interviewing 4 different companies, one on Monday, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and you're on Thursday from 10 to 12. So every company's going to come in and give a presentation from 10 to 12, and then we're going to decide who to use. And so I went in on Thursday. Some of the companies that they actually used or interviewed and came in and did their presentation, one of them was a $60 million company. What's it called? Behavioral Sciences Technologies, BST. Some of these companies were very, very big, and they've been around for years. Of course, I've been around for years, but I know what I've got is unique. And I know what I've got works better than anything else you ever tried. So they listened to my 2-hour presentation, and of course, I got the job for Fab 22. By the way, Intel calls these fabs, it's where they manufacture. They're going to construct a manufacturing plant that manufactures the microchips that go into the computers, okay? So how did that work out? Intel Fab 22 was the fastest built fab ever in Intel history. It was the safest built fab ever in Intel history. I was actually featured on their website for a while, and I ended up from that job, because that job turned out so well, I ended up going to Rio Rancho, New Mexico for Fab 11X, Fab D1D in Portland, Oregon, right outside of Portland, Oregon. Went to Fab 24 in Leixlip, Ireland, right south of Dublin. They sent me all over the place because of the results. If you get results, they like you, and that's what you want. You want results, and it's all about people, folks. It's all about your people and how they're thinking about themselves, how they feel about themselves. That's the 2 most critical parts that you've got to start thinking about working on. The Shell Maya 2, the Shell Maya 2 project, by the way, on the Houston Chip Channel, that particular job paid $1 less than all the other jobs around it. We had a long waiting list of people trying to get on our project because people heard about how positive that project was. And people just were enthralled to come work with us. And here's what I'll tell everybody. One of the main things we have to do in this process is make it fun. The process, if your safety process are not fun, people are not enjoying them, then it's work. And people don't want more work. You got to make this process fun. It's got to be enjoyable, and you've got to get people to work together. Let me give you an example. Went to the civil department. These were the concrete guys, the carpenters, and one of the foremen from that craft came over and said, Roy, this was how we were finishing not quite finished, probably about 9 months into the project or 8 months into the project. And he said, Roy, this is the best project I've ever been on. And I said, what makes it so good? He said, yesterday the rod busters, their equipment, none of their materials came in yesterday. So they were sitting around, and they came over to us. And he said, Roy, on other projects, we don't even talk to those people. That craft is made up of some people we don't like, and we don't talk to them. And so he said, they came over and said, hey, our materials didn't come in today. What is it that we can do to help you in your jobs today? And they said, hey, our housekeeping is lousy. We could use some help in housekeeping. and they willingly came in and helped us. He said, I've never seen that before. But that's what happens when you get people feeling good about themselves, when everybody thinks they're valuable, they're important, and that they want to do a great job. Everybody wants to do a great job. And that's the kind of motivation and desire that you have to instill in your people. And there's a way of doing that. So that's what I want to stress with you. All right, I'm getting close to, well, Cindy, next slide. Let's see what's the next slide is, Cindy. I forgot. Questions and answers. Let's start with a few. If anybody's got a question, I've been doing all the talking here, so I'll entertain some questions. And by the way, if you're interested, my email address is on the slides, and my cell phone is on the slides. If you want to see some of the other clients that we've dealt with, you can go to royflores.com, and that'll give you some of the other clients. We work with a lot of government agencies, a lot of organizations, petrochem, construction, just a variety of industries. So let me know if you'd like to get this PowerPoint slide. I'd love to send it to you. If you'd like to ask more questions, if I don't cover them for you today, then we can do that as well.
All right, we have had a couple of requests for the PowerPoint. So
yes,
willing to share it, we'll put it up on the conference website so folks can download and get that information.
Okay, yeah, we can do it. And I'd love for them to contact me, and so I can talk to them as well. And for the first 10 that decide to contact me, I'll do a short evaluation for y'all. It's free, so if I can give you a short evaluation on your safety part, okay?
So while we're looking at seeing if anybody has any comments, could you explain to the folks, because this was something when I first started learning about you and what you do, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Can you explain to folks kind of just in a brief nutshell what that is so that they have some concept of it if they're not familiar?
Sure. Okay. So neuro-linguistic programming is basically the science. It's a branch of psychology that deals with how language or linguistics affects our neurology, our brain, and how we think and what we believe. And so through language patterns, and that's why I say very specific language, very specific words, phrases, and questions, you get people to start thinking differently, and you reprogram them for success. So let me give you a quick example. When somebody says, I don't know how to do something, or I can't do it, they immediately shut down the neurological pathways to the brain that has a solution. So the minute someone says, I can't do something, or I don't know how, they shut down their brain waves. And so they're no longer thinking of a solution. They can't think of a solution. They've actually shut down the neurological pathways. So one of the ways that you can turn that around is, again, through language, through linguistics. When somebody says, I don't know how, the question that you can ask is, if you did know how would you do it? So it's in a question that you get them. And the minute you ask them, if you did know how would you do it? They now have to start thinking of possibilities. And so they start thinking of solutions, and that's how you return the brain back on again. So we teach supervisors and not just supervisors, but, from executive level all down to the frontline supervisors, these particular language skills so that they learn to pick up on it and they learn to communicate with people in a way that gets them to start operating at a much higher level. Mm-hmm.
Roy, this is David Alexander. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm on the board of directors here. I'm also an arbitrator. TXLMC prides itself on trying to encourage and promote collaboration between management and labor. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt that safety is the win-win situation and a good starting point for building collaboration. Mm-hmm. Yet, especially since most labor contracts have a requirement that management and labor meet together in a safety committee meeting.
Right.
But as an arbitrator, I can't tell you how many I've seen where the safety committee is ineffective, either from management's fault, union's fault, people not attending meetings, bad attitudes, and ineffective. I've seen some that were very effective, but
Mhm.
most of them are not effective. I just wonder if you could comment on that.
And David, you probably aware that that's not unusual, right? I
Right.
mean, and I've worked with unions as well. So I've worked with United Auto Workers Union, the electrical unions. I've worked with a variety of unions as well. And so that's a real common problem when you get, labor and management together. So this process is we have to implement it for both sides. In other words, to start agreeing that, hey, there's a new possibility, there's a new way that we might consider doing things that's going to give everybody, like you're saying, David, it's a win-win for everybody. The company wins, the organization wins, the union wins. God, and think about it. If we can do things without getting people hurt, and we're doing phenomenal in cost and schedule and productivity, I mean, who would say no to that? And so but again, it's the mindsets that we have to change, because I'll tell you, I go into a lot of organizations just like this vice president that says, I don't care how people feel. I get that a lot. And so yeah, it's really getting, David, people to consider a new possibility. Okay.
Well, that's, yeah. But how do they do that internally
Well,
without hiring Roy Flores?
yeah, well, yeah, sometimes that can be a challenge. And so we have to present them different options, and we have to get them, again, thinking about what's best, not just for the organization, but themselves personally as well. Yeah. And so, David, you and I can talk offline a little bit. I mean, I don't mind sharing some ideas with you, but yeah, I'd like to, if y'all think it might be worthwhile, I could talk to y'all, in a group meeting if y'all like.
Yeah, I think, David, you just hit on the age-old problem for most safety professionals is how do we change the culture?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
about,
That's the answer. How? And
Yeah.
actually, top management is really the key to it. I think you would say, Roy.
Absolutely, David. Absolutely. And here's the thing. The majority of top management, when I go talk to them, they said, "Oh, we got a great culture. Oh, we got a phenomenal culture." And I said, "Yeah, but you had 4 fatalities in the last 3 years. How can you say you've got?" But they don't. And I've actually had some say, "No, we don't want to talk to you because we don't want to mess with our culture." And I'm thinking, well, that's where you got to start. And you're right, David. It's got to start with senior managers. And fortunately, I've got enough, influence and persuasion skills that I've been able to do pretty well over the last 30 years in getting clients.
I'm sure of that.
So
very good. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions coming up in the chat here. So with that, I'll start to end the session. And if you have questions, go ahead while I'm talking. We can still take a few. We've got a few minutes, but just in the interest of everyone's time, we're going to definitely thank Roy for your participation and information today. He's out traveling, so we appreciate him being able to call in from his location. So just to the attendees, the feedback form has been posted in the chat, so definitely please take a moment to fill that out. As we said before, any of the presentations that we received from the speakers will be posting on our conference website at the end of the conference so that we can make sure we gather up the latest and greatest for everybody. One reminder or one announcement that just came in here a few minutes ago, we're inviting everybody at the end of the next session, so the last session for the day, at the end of that session, if you'll go back to the link for the keynote this morning, so we call it track 1, but the keynote link from first thing this morning, they're going to do some end of the day door prizes and some last minute announcements from stuff from today, and then getting you guys ready for tomorrow. And I say guys, sorry, I'm from Chicago, guys and gals.
It's all of them. It's everybody,
yeah,
Cindy.
To me, it's like y'all in Texas.
I know it.
But so yeah, I don't see anything else popping up in the chat. So with that, a reminder, we'll take a break and our next session will start at 4 p.m. So from 4 to 5 is our last session. And then right there at the end of that session, if you pop back into track 1, you might be able to win a door prize for the day. So thanks so much participation, and we'll see you guys back soon.
Okay, thank you, Cindy, and thank you everyone else for your time here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Roy, one company I know got that going, and Cindy knows about it by working toward an OSHA award, a prestigious OSHA award. In fact, Cindy's worked with them. That's how we met Cindy, and that worked well for that company. I don't know if that impetus came from top management or if it came from the union, but
It was a little of both, David. It ended up, my understanding of when I first started working with them, the union had been trying to accomplish the VPP for quite a while. And they were having, it wasn't that they weren't having management buy-in, but it was a little bit tough to get some of the management buy-in. So they had found the OSHA Challenge program, which is what I work on, as a kind of an intermediary, because the voluntary protection program, you're dealing with OSHA directly, but Challenge, you're dealing with a third party. So it's kind of a way to ease in. So they've been working on it for quite a while. So there's 3 stages of the OSHA Challenge program. They're actually in stage 3. They're almost done with stage 3. I'm happy to report they're getting really, really close.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, they're getting really close to putting in their VPP application. I think if it had not been for the pandemic, that they probably would have already had it in. But of course, that's for not only the site, but also for OSHA, because they're not out doing those audits right now. So no, but it's good. It's good news, and they've made a lot of progress. And that site, they've switched company names 3 times in the time frame that I've been with them. And they've made great progress. So I'm very proud of them.
I think we need to get them back next year. They spoke at the very first safety workshop we had. I got them in because I'd done an arbitration with them. And the safety.
They're actually on a presentation opposite us right now.
So we could have been listening to them.
Well, they weren't talking on safety though. They were talking.
Okay.
Do arbitration.
Are they the one with Walter right now?
Yes.
So John Savoy is here.
He's on with Walter. Yeah, exactly. So they're participating just in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a good group.
All right. Very good.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Roy. Very good.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.